Welcome back to another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous, the internet's #1 podcast about buying and selling small businesses. I am here today with my co-host, Mills Snell. Michael is on vacation. This should still be a good one. Anyway, we can talk about San Antonio poorly behind his back if we want. Mills, this should be fun. Just two of us.
Yeah, but I love it.
Well, we got two cool deals today. I think they could not be much different. A commercial roofing contractor and a low-cost GoPro drone. So Mills, if you would please kick us off. We want to start with a word from one of our sponsors, and then we'll get right into the first deal.
Yeah. So sponsor today is Beyond 8 Figures podcast. It's beyond8figures.com. It's a podcast where entrepreneurs and experts speak up on the topics related to business and life in general. Each week, the host, Andrew Lawrence, is joined by interviewees from different backgrounds to discuss what helped them get ahead while succeeding at entrepreneurship. You'll learn how these people achieve success by exploring their personal journeys along the way, both professionally and emotionally. So make sure you check them out. And I've listened to a couple episodes. It's really fun. It's generally more positive than the Acquisitions Anonymous podcast, where we typically just poop on deals. So give those guys a listen. And thanks so much for supporting the podcast.
Thank you so much to Beyond 8 Figures for sponsoring us. Really positive group of guys. They are available everywhere podcasts are sold, including Apple, Google, Spotify, and Stitcher, as you can see on the screen if you're with us on YouTube. All right, Mills, you got our first deal today. What we got?
Yeah, so this is a commercial roofing company, which some of our regular listeners will know that I am part owner of a commercial roofing business here in South Carolina. So this one is a fun one. I think we've had this one in our parking lot, as we call it, for quite some time. And today's a good day, I think, to talk about it. So it's a commercial roofing company with 90 employees. They have over $14.5 million in sales. Their project sizes range from $75,000 to $3.75 million. The annual cash flow is just over $3 million, $3,057,000. The asking price is $13,425,000. The revenue, I'm guessing this is in the most recent year, whenever this was $14,769,000, and again $3,057,000 in cash flow. So it's 21% profit margin. The business is located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with a 75-mile radius outside of Pittsburgh. And this business, they are predominantly W-2 employees. So they've got 90 total employees on W-2, but 15 of those are salaried support staff and 75 are hourly craftsmen and sheet metal workers. They say that they use subcontractors as needed, but 95% of it is self-performed. The reason for sale is other endeavors. Not sure exactly what that means, but it sounds kind of ominous. They rely on, word of mouth referrals, having a strong foothold in that area, and longstanding relationships. So a couple things here, they focus on larger industrial and institutional products. They've been around over 20 years. It's all commercial. It's about 50% of their revenue is re-roofing, 40% new construction, and 10% maintenance. They, they self-perform, they sub out only as needed, which we can talk about a little bit. And they do work for, roof consultants, which are a fixture of our industry, general contractors, and private owners. They say that it's a highly sought after business in their area. They currently have 28 jobs going with over $9 million in assets. The broker says the bank loan is nearly 70% collateralized. It's a mixture of union and non-union. The union side is making up 80% of their total sales and 60% of their current projects. They're generally the largest employer on a month-to-month basis in their union. That might be the sheet metal union, or it may be that there's a roofing union in that area. I'm not sure. They employ an average of 44 roofers and 15 sheet metal workers per day, with a fairly even split of new construction versus renovation, and mostly in the public sector. So if you're in this part of the world and you want to do publicly funded projects, there's almost always a union component. So you may look at it from the outside and say, I don't want to buy a union business. But if you want to own a roofing business in this part of the world, in this part of the country, it's kind of unavoidable. You have to have a union component. Again, it's priced at 13,425,000, so that's a little over a 4x multiple. And maybe we'll leave it at that for now, and then we can delve into things a little bit more.
So this is interesting, Mills. As our resident roofer, I have a lot of questions here for you. So these guys they said their union side is 80% of revenue. Is that typical in this industry, that it's mostly union?
In this part of the world, it definitely is. So like we have zero union labor, in South Carolina, and most of the Southeast is, right to work states. So again, if you want to do publicly funded projects, so if you want to work on schools and hospitals and, public facilities like, baseball stadiums or something, you're going to have to be willing to have union labor, because most of those contracts, have some clauses, have some components that require union participation. So you may say, hey, look, I have to own a roofing business in Pennsylvania and it can't have any union labor. Well, it's going to be a very fundamentally different business. It wouldn't really be able to focus on larger projects like the ones that they say they do.
Okay. And they say that they've got 90 FTEs and they self-perform 95% of their work. Is that generally good?
Yes, that's very, very good. Now, it's good if you look at just at the headline number. The devil's in the details always, but having your own captive labor ends up being worth its weight in gold, because if you're relying on subcontractors, and we've talked about this with a number of other businesses, it's problematic. You don't have as much control. I mean, even by the letter of the law in the IRS, you literally have, technically very little control over how your subcontractors perform work. But the quality just tends to suffer because the incentives aren't well aligned. The subcontractors are going to get paid based on production. Hey, you're going to pay us a certain amount of money to put this roof on, and so the faster we do it, the better it is. The subcontractors rarely have a brand, and so they will be, typically there's a 1 to 2 year workmanship warranty for most construction projects, meaning if anything goes wrong in the first year to 2 years, we have to come back and fix it as the contractor. And then, and roofing is largely warranty centric work, then there's like a 20-year warranty, that most people are buying. So if anything happens in those subsequent years, the manufacturer is getting involved. The point being, when there's an issue, the sub is long gone and it's your brand that's on the line. And if you're doing subpar work, manufacturers don't like that. Customers don't like it. General contractors don't like it. And at the end of the day, it may not really be you who's doing it.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great points. So these guys, they're going to do 14 million in sales. They've got 28 jobs that are currently in various stages of progress, which means their average job size is about $500,000. Is that a big roofing job? Is that a small roofing job, average?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, to put like a new roof on a gas station might be $25,000. To re-roof, a 50,000 square foot warehouse, it just varies. It depends on the conditions. But my guess is that, there's a really big difference between, the average and, and the median on this. I mean, they mentioned a job as big as 3.75 million. That is probably the biggest job they've ever done, just given where they are in total revenue. My guess is that you have a couple of really big jobs, especially because they have union labor, and then they have tons of, service work, right? Those are $500, $1,000 calls. And then there's probably lots of small roofs that are, $50 to $100 to $150,000. But this is very normal. Nothing about their job sizes sticks out to me, except that they probably took on a ton of risk on that $3.75 million job. And I'd want to know, how did that project go? What did you learn? Where did you hit your face on the pavement? Did you staff the job appropriately from a project management and an estimating standpoint? Just on a job that big, their margins are going to be really, really compressed. So the fact that they're, stating 21% net margin, that's definitely top decile margins for commercial roofing. I'd really want to press on that, a good bit harder to find out how real is it.
For what it's worth, looking at the financials in the document here, that is an SDE margin, not necessarily an EBITDA margin, and they're adding back $430,000 of owner's wages. and then they have a negative replacement cost of $80,000. So basically, this assumes that owner can replace his $431,000 salary with an $80,000 W-2 employee, which doesn't take a rocket scientist to guess that that might be a little cheap for the caliber of person you're going to want to oversee your $14 million construction company as basically CEO.
And, you know, this says that there's 3 owners here. One of them's absent and 2 of them are active. I mean, these are not the types of businesses, I'm living through this, but these are not the types of businesses that transition overnight. You know, you can't just say, hey, these 2 guys are gone, they're out, you know, the knowledge transfer happens, you know, simultaneously. It doesn't happen. There's got to be a massive overlap between the former owners and the new owner being there. And you're right, $80,000 isn't going to cut it. Probably not even twice that amount to get somebody competent.
I do commend them. They do say in their document here, the seller training period is 6 to 12 months, which a lot of times they will say it's 6 to 12 days or something, right? See you later. Yeah, 2 weeks, right? But 6 to 12 months here seems like, you know, they understand that they're going to need to pass you the reins over time, which I think is good. There's also another interesting trend in their financials. We don't have full detail, but we do have the full detail on the add backs, no detail on the actual expenses. But the add backs, the depreciation line in their add backs goes from $45,000 to $49,000. And then 2020, the year that they're selling, it jumps to $305,000 of depreciation, which tells me they probably just bought a bunch of equipment and have begun to depreciate it. You know, this is a $250,000 jump in depreciation expense. So let's assume, I don't know, the useful life on a truck is 10 years or something. So this means they just bought $2.5 million of equipment, which I think this is a really good thing, because a lot of times when we look at these deals, they go, oh, we have $9 million of assets. And we go, well, yeah, that's like the price you paid for them. They're fully depreciated. They're probably, you know, rust buckets, right? But in this case, I can estimate that at least $2.5 million of their $9 million on assets are probably pretty new, right?
Yeah. And it depends on what they bought, right? I mean, it could be that they bought, you know, really heavy equipment like dump trucks and, you know, material handling, you know, things that basically forklifts that put stuff on the roof, or they could have bought, you know, a bunch of pickup trucks, a fleet full of pickup trucks. So what they bought, I think, is also important. But you're right. That reverse engineering, I think, is probably going to be pretty accurate. And, you know, they just stroke the checks for it. They want to be paid for it. I don't think we have a balance sheet. I wonder if they, you know, just paid cash. Yeah, we don't have a balance sheet. I wonder if they paid cash for that, or, you know, if it's heavily financed and now there's debt on the company's balance sheet to offset it.
It's cash, Mills, because they're not adding back any interest expense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There is an interest expense add back line item. It is $1,000 or negative $1,000, whatever that means. So I don't think there's a lot of debt that they're servicing, which is good. It means they probably own these assets free and clear. So Mills,
let's talk about some of these add backs real quick, Bill. Because I mean, people like to beat up on add backs. Some of these I think are actually, you know, real and good. You know, $60,000 a year auto expense, $5,000 a month. If you have 3 owners and they all keep brand new trucks, you know, or they do this to, I mean, that probably falls to the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to have to spend $5,000 a month. You know, their pension, you know, life insurance, like they're probably overfunding, you know, they said it's $5,300 a year for 3 life and disability policies for the 3 owners. Like I like these kind of add backs because they are not going to have to continue, more than likely, right? Some big line items like that. The fact, though, that they say on meals and entertainment that they spent $109,000 in 2018, I'd really want to know. That sounds like maybe you took all your clients on a really big trip somewhere and it was really expensive.
Yeah.
Not like your trips to Chick-fil-A every Monday.
Right. But like if you took your clients, that's not necessarily an add back, right? That's kind of a cost of doing business, right? If this is
exactly, that's a marketing line item.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people tend to just add back. They go, oh, meals and entertainment, that line item is an add back. Well, that line item is not an add back if those meals and entertainment are driving your revenue. There are tons of businesses, right, that operate on handshakes and take you to the baseball game and all that stuff. Like that's normal.
Yes. Or like, what if they said, I mean, this is not the industry that it would happen in, but hey, we buy all of our employees lunch, you know, and that's why it was $100,000 a year. And hey, by the way, now we're going to stop. You know, how do you think that goes over with your employees if you're stopping buying lunch? Like,
Right. Right. So Mills, at a very high level, this looks like a damn good roofing company, is it not? Like what scares you about this listing?
I think that the union labor component is just very, very difficult because you're going to, and there's people who have done this. Some of them active on SMB. Nick Fideli bought a roofing business with a union labor component, and it's there. You just are going to inherit some pension liability associated with the union. The flip side of the difficulty, and it's going to make the business harder to sell the next go round, right? Whenever you're ready to be done with it. But the flip side of that is if you need more skilled labor, you just call up the union hall and you tell them, hey, look, I need this many journeymen, I need this many apprentices. Like put them on, put them on my jobs. And your skilled labor is theoretically easier to solve for. But it's just if it's your first transaction, it's very, very difficult to buy a business that has a union component. And that's why if you look at most, sophisticated buyers who do this time and time again, they just avoid them, just kind of flat out avoid them. It's too problematic.
So if you did want to buy this business, I imagine there's a whole section of your diligence checklist around the union relationship, right? And the pension and all that stuff. So can you kind of unpack like what you would have to diligence in working with the union? What would you want to understand?
Man, it's really difficult because a lot of it, this kind of feels like some conversation you'd be having in like the 1920s or 30s, but there's a lot of politics involved. They say, we are the number one employer at our union hall. That maybe creates some sway, so to speak, but to me, there's a lot of gray area there. And even if you get it all ironed out, all in black and white, hey, here's kind of our labor rates, here's what we're anticipating the labor rates to be. You don't know how long the labor rates have been what they are today and how long they're going to continue. Those are usually kind of multi-year agreements that are being negotiated. There's a lot of detail that you would want to get, and you may not be able to get it all right away. So you think about the sellers, they have a very tricky relationship with the union. They rely on them, but they are also at odds with them from an incentive standpoint. You're not going to have two conversations with the sellers and say, hey, it's time for me to, get in there and start talking to your union contacts. It's very, very difficult to go down that path. And I would have to defer to somebody who's done it firsthand about, the nuances of how they navigated it.
Yep. I would understand. You probably expect you want to understand those pension liabilities too, which is interesting that they're adding back pension expense and it's a union business. So
I wonder though if that's just each of the owners, because the detail is, alluding to a 401k, and it kind of looks like they're just maxing out their 401ks for these three guys.
Okay. Maybe that's it. Anything else to add on this roofing business before we move on to the next one?
This is something that we may have mentioned on another episode, but it's impossible to know from the outside looking in, but inside the roofing industry, it's probably the worst time in, modern history to buy a roofing business from a supply chain standpoint. The lead times have gone from 2 weeks to 50 weeks on a lot of materials. And there's no way that you could look at this and know that. There's no way that you could, even in conversations with sellers, I've talked to some people who have been trying to buy and have bought roofing businesses, and they're like, yeah, my sellers say it's not a big deal. They're navigating it really well. And I'm sure they are, right? They have every reason to tell you that it's not a big deal, but you want to try and triangulate, around the industry as much as you can and do some due diligence that's not just coming from the people who have every incentive to make you feel warm and fuzzy about buying something. So, reach out to other folks in the industry to find out what's actually happening inside. How are things going? Where is this industry in its natural cyclicality? Because I think if you actually talk to some people who know, right now would be just hands down, it'd be the worst time to buy a roofing business. It'd be really, really hard.
So talk to operators, network around. This is like when you hire somebody, you don't just call the references they give you. Like you get the backdoor references, right? It's kind of the same thing. Talk to somebody that's not the broker or the seller about this industry.
Yep, exactly. And that, like, there's trade associations, industry associations, you can do that. And you can, You don't have to tell them the company you're looking at buying, but just try and poke around as much as you can.
Yep. All right. Makes sense. Cool. All right. So this next deal, let's move on to the next one. This one is pretty cool. This came to us from a listener. So this was submitted by the owner of this business, who is trying to sell it, which is pretty cool. And he explicitly authorized us to share all of this information. So we are acquisitions not so anonymous on the second deal, but all with the permission of the seller. So this is pretty cool business. I'm going to put it on the screen now if you're watching along with us on YouTube. This business is called Air Video. And if you're not watching along with us, it is basically a Nerf football. It's like a Nerfy football shaped thing with wings on the back, right? With like a tail on the back, and you mount your GoPro. There's like a socket that accepts a GoPro on the front. So you can throw the Nerf ball essentially and get a really cool shot with the GoPro. The owner describes it as basically a poor man's drone, right? If you want like that type of drone shot through the air, you can throw it. And on their website, they've got a couple examples, airvideo.com, AER video.com. You can kind of see the types of shots that they can produce, which is pretty cool and do sort of replicate drone shots on the cheap. So the owner of this business sent us an email. He said he started in 2016 in the Netherlands. It's now based in Germany. It was designed to be a cheap alternative to a camera drone. Initially did it on Kickstarter, did really well on Kickstarter. Then in 2018, they were on the German version of Shark Tank, and they sold 15% of the business at $1 million valuation. Says they've done about $150,000 of annual revenue each of the past 3 years. So it's not growing, but he says it is profitable. It says he's got a pretty smooth process in place for the manufacturing, marketing, logistics. Sounds like the business, he kind of runs on autopilot, but doesn't grow on autopilot. And he can't figure out how to grow it. He says they did do some product dev over the last year or two. They tried to make, just like we have Throw Your GoPro is the main product, they tried to make Throw Your Phone happen. And he said for a lot of reasons it didn't work, mainly because I think people didn't want to throw their $1,000 phones. And they just couldn't get it off the ground. So that product launch failed. The seller says he's pretty demotivated. He reevaluated his life and wants to pursue some other things. So he'd like to sell the business. It is on Flippa. You can go on Flippa and find it. We'll put it on the screen here. It's called the 5-year established e-commerce business selling camera accessories in the action sports niche. And he's asking $60,000 excluding inventory or $100,000-ish inclusive of inventory. So Mills, what do you think about this business? It seems pretty cool. Cool product.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, buyer business fit is like what's kind of ringing in my ear. The average order value seems pretty good. It's like 80 euros, 85, whatever US dollars. I guess he's making them or sourcing them right somewhere in Europe, and then he's shipping them from Europe to the United States. And he's got a massive, I can't remember where I saw this, a lot of his revenue is coming from the United States. Logistically, there's got to be some fine tuning there, right? That could happen in terms of the logistics.
Yes. I mean, does it necessarily say he's sourcing from Europe? It says he's based in Europe. This type of thing I would think is probably coming from China. If I just had to guess, it's foam. And it's just gonna be done way cheaper in China. It's some of these types of things you can't even do anywhere but China because the rest of the world has forgotten how to make them. But yeah, I would bet he's probably sourcing this in Asia. And then if he's still doing all of his fulfillment in Europe, but all of his sales are in America, there's definitely an opportunity to set up a 3PL in America. However, given the size of this business, being that it's $150,000 a year in sales and it's a $85 AOV, that is 1,750 orders a year, also known as 4.8 a day. So like 5 orders a day, I'd be willing to bet money this guy is shipping it himself, like from his garage. Like these things are small. So I don't know that this business, I could be wrong. I don't know this business is large enough to support the cost structure of a 3PL and maintain whatever flow through he's got. If it is, if I'm wrong about that, it would be much easier to flip your 3PL from Europe over to the United States. I also wonder, not an expert in European tax, but I wonder if there might be some VAT or lack of VAT implications by importing from the U.S. directly into China, or from China directly in the U.S., or some tariff implications. There are certain stuff, like steel, wood, that is subject to pretty steep tariffs right now coming in from Asia. And I don't know if foam or toys or whatever this would be categorized as, toys maybe, would kind of get dinged on the tariffs. So you'd have to ask those questions if you're going to move your logistics internationally. But of course, there's some probably pretty juicy shipping savings on the table.
Mm-hmm. Bill, you mentioned something about the kind of, maybe I'm imagining a line where if you're under a certain size or threshold, third-party logistics doesn't make sense. And when you get over it, it probably, is accretive in some way. How do you think about what that line is? This is not specific to this business, but I think it's relevant.
So that is a super nuanced question, Mills. It depends a lot on your...
You do all your own, right? You do all your own distribution.
We do currently do all of our own distribution. In our early days, we did 3PL. And then we got to a point from a complexity point of view that having that control where I could just say, hey, I want to try this new bundle. So I just walk in the warehouse and I go, hey guys, can you make 10 of these? Just attach them together in a bag, right? To do that with a 3PL, you have to call them, you have to tell them what you want, they have to quote it, then they have to do it. And it's like 1 to 2 weeks of lag, and they're, the money is kind of immaterial, but they'll charge you a couple bucks for it. But just the brain damage of it's a special project, right? Just to see if people want to buy a bundle of the red one and the blue one, right? So our business grew to a point where we're doing a lot of kits and bundles. We're also doing some in-house manufacturing. So it made sense just to centralize the ops. That being said, we are now at the scale, kind of 50 million plus in sales, where the 3PL, we have enough scale that the 3PLs are now willing to do custom stuff for us, which, at lower scales, 3PLs are very rigid because you're just not a big customer. So it's weird in that there might be almost this sort of U shape where in the early days, 3PL can make the most sense because it's easy to get off the ground. In the mid days, you may be tempted, if you have a business that's semi-custom, you start to have enough scale to justify doing it yourself if you need custom stuff. And then at the larger side, 3PL starts to make sense again in all cases because you have the clout to make them do custom stuff. But in this case, 5 orders a day is not sexy to any 3PL. But to give you guys an idea of what a 3PL costs, they'll probably charge you between $2 and $3 to pick this order, and they've got labor in it. So they're talking about a $5 a day profit, probably, by bringing on this account. That's just tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, this business, it's a $60,000 asking price. If you were really, really into GoPro and you also had a pretty decent sized social media following, it seems like you could totally just fold this thing into, maybe you just do what this guy's doing and you try and do it on your own. You try and do it out of your house, 5 orders a day. And it could probably be a fun little side project, so to speak.
Yeah, so they raised 123,000 euros on Kickstarter. I don't have their Instagram up, but maybe they've got some YouTube following, etc. If you've got a little bit of an audience here, they got 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, so not much. Instagram is probably roughly similar. So they don't have a platform, but Mills, as you were saying, if you were already in action sports or something and you had a whole bunch of people that followed you that were into this type of stuff, mm-hmm. and you could kind of try to make this a thing, you could probably goose sales a little bit by putting it in front of an existing kind of action sports audience. They got almost 30,000 on Instagram, which is, pretty impressive for a business this small. The other thing,
so Bill, fear,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, my fear with this is has it already popped? It was a new thing. It's kind of a novelty product. Have you kind of saturated, a decent portion of your target market? And they've already got 28,000 Instagram followers, right? They've already been through the Kickstarter phase. So has all the excitement around this product already happened? And now you're just kind of banking on the long tail of, 5 orders a day?
Very possible. You would have to also ask yourself, or ask the seller, who bought it. One thing that occurs to me is the way this seems marketed is very much towards adult action sports athletes. I think there could be a huge market here in kids, where you do not want, like your kid has a GoPro because they watch GoPro stuff on YouTube and they want a drone and you don't want to spend $500 on a drone for your kid. So if you could get the price on this down a little bit from 88, it seems a little pricey, but like this is a $49.99 gift for a kid, like that's a more renewable market, like because there's new kids getting into drone photography all the time. You could try to position it that way. This also strikes me as a product that you could probably do well on Facebook ads, because it lends itself really well to like innovative videos and action sports and stuff, and it's cool. I do think the price point at $90 is a little bit above that kind of impulse purchase price point that does so well on Facebook ads. If you could get it down to $50, kind of as I said, I think this would be very advertisable. There's probably also some opportunities to take your brand Air Video and expand it, because right now he probably thinks his brand is about this little Nerf thing that holds cameras. If he were to reimagine it and say, Air Video is about sort of accessories that let you do drone photography, like for drone photography enthusiasts, right? I'm sure there are all kinds of little accessories you could make for actual drones or for GoPro cameras, or, here's how to strap mounts for GoPros onto other jerry-rig things, like if, the front grille of your car or whatever. If they would kind of broaden their aperture of what they think this brand is and put that Air Video stuff on other products, because they've got this customer here who's interested in innovative drone photography, right, with different throwing arcs, but also doesn't want to buy a drone. That person probably wants to buy other stuff too. I'd find a way to sell it to him. And by the way, he's only asking.
Bill, you buy.
Go ahead, Mills.
You go ahead. No, you go ahead.
By the way, he's only asking $100,000, which includes a bunch of inventory. And this business is, we don't know the profitability profile, but it's revenue of about 150. Let's say it makes 50 grand a year. That's not that bad. It says on Flippa he makes $333,000 a month in profit, which is $40,000 a year. So he wants like 2 times, like inventory and everything included, it's like 2.5 times EBITDA. So he's got reasonable price expectations. By the way, I don't think he's underpriced it. I think this is probably what it's worth. It's small. It's not growing. It's one product. I think this is a fair price for it. But the point is, like, it's not. You don't have to pay up like a huge, rich multiple for this thing.
Bill, I mean, you've focused, I think, on more kind of consumable, repeatable sales. Sales generating products. Things where brand affinity and brand loyalty actually gets you a bigger, lifetime customer value. How do you think about, I've heard you speak, in a really fascinating way about, the weight of something and, the dimensions and how that affects shipping costs and all those things I think come into play. But on this, my concern is like, it's not something that somebody's going to probably buy twice. Like if it gets stuck in a tree and their GoPro, is in it, they're definitely not buying another one, kind of thing. So how do you think about the novelty, kind of more one-time purchase? You've already started to answer it to say, expand your brand to be something more, something a little bit broader. But to me, there's got to be a discount factor for the fact that this is not, like the Dollar Shave Club where every single month you're getting razor blades in the mail and there's lower churn.
Yeah, so there's a balance, right? If you are going to have a single purchase product like this, you have to have a huge TAM, a huge total addressable market. And I'll give an example, like my friends over at Ridge Wallet. Like if you're a guy listening to this, you have seen the ads for Ridge Wallet, right? They're huge. I think they're like 100 million plus, crushing it. That wallet, that thing is freaking bomb proof. Like you are never going to buy another one. They say that's lifetime warranty, like whole deal. Like that is not a consumable product, right? And you only carry one wallet as a guy. But their TAM is so giant, right? It's all guys with wallets that they can build a big business there, right? Without consumables. The thing that consumables gets you is a higher lifetime value, right? So you can come back again and again. So you can operate in a smaller TAM because you're getting more money out of each consumer. With something not consumable, you like the most you're ever going to get out of this guy that buys an Air Video thing is $90, right? Unless you maybe new products, right? But ultimately, even if somebody bought one of everything you own, maybe it's $200 or $300, right? Versus a $50 consumable. If they use it for 3 years, they might spend $1,000 or more. So it's kind of, you want to cross this idea of lifetime value of the customer with size of your TAM. Like massive TAM that you can advertise to, you can get away with a non-consumable. Like the guys at Ridge built an amazing business, right, with a non-consumable. So having a consumable just kind of buffers a smaller TAM or gives you a little bit more room for error. Whereas the TAM for this, I don't know how big this is, right? Because this is people that can afford a GoPro, but can't afford a drone and care enough about their GoPro footage to spend $80 on an accessory, but not enough to spend $400. Like, I don't know how big this TAM is, maybe. Unless the TAM is kids, which is a huge TAM, right? So that's why I kind of went to kids earlier. Like, you got to find, it could be this product is good, but it's pointed at the wrong end market. You know, maybe you got to point it at a bigger TAM and reposition it. So, if I were diligencing this, I would really, really be interested in where the traffic was coming from. I would want to know if they are running any Facebook ads at all, or I'd also like, is it just all trickle down from Google and Kickstarter, or do they have other influencers? Like, how do people hear about this? Have people ever bought more than one? Is it all word of mouth? Do they tell their friends? Like, that's what I would really want to understand, to your point, Mills, about, is this just the long tail after a pop? How are new people discovering this? And then I'd want to ask myself, how can I get a lot more new people to discover this? Like, what are the types of people that discover this organically and buy it? And where do more people like them hang out? And is there a way to go get them? I mean, there's a lot of work here. I mean, this isn't the type of business that you just buy and can explode. But if you are willing to like understand this market and do kind of your classic product positioning and marketing, and then figure out the digital marketing tactics to get the product in front of them, which is all risky and expensive and might not work, and is usually a trial and error exercise, and each trial is expensive because you blow money on Facebook and Instagram ads, etc. So I'm not trying to say this is easy, but that's what success looks like in this deal, is trying to get it in front of a lot more people economically and maybe telling the story a little different. So
yeah, that's a great insight, man.
So I think this one's cool. If you want to buy this one, it is for sale. We will put in the show notes how to contact Pablo, the owner. It's pablo@airvideo.com. You can just shoot him an email, or you can inquire via Flippa. On Flippa, it's just called Air Video. So search for Air Video Flippa, and you can reach out to Pablo. All right. That concludes another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous. This was really fun. Thanks for holding it down with me, Mills. And we will see you guys next week.